All right, so this is part two of your notes. I'm going to finish the rest of the notes for that section. So first of all, just like we did before, remember we have to define the variables first. So let's look at the question. So just kind of jumping ahead here, it says how many math book English books did she buy? Because it says, Callie bought 6 books and spent $150. Math books cost $23, and English books cost $27. How many math books and English books did she buy? Okay, so the math books and the English books is what we are solving for. Oops, I went back to the last question. So we're going to define math books as M and English books as E. Okay, now the first equation we're going to define based on the first piece of information they give us, which is 6 books total. So she bought a total of 6 books, which means that if you add the math books plus the English books, that should give us the 6 books. So M plus E equals 6. All right. So then, how about the cost? So she spent $154. All right. Well, remember that's a total, so that equation will be equal to that, and we get that from figuring out how many math books times $23 and how many English books times $27. So 23M, $23 times math books plus $27 times the English books will equal 154. Okay, so now we're going to set these two equations up. And notice how I put the one that has the smaller numbers on the bottom, because that's the one we're going to change and multiply. Now, neither of these equations, just like the last one, are set equal to one of the variables or have one of those M or E by itself. So we're going to do elimination. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to try and get rid of M. And to do that, well, that means that this M has to be minus 23 down here. In order for that to be minus 23, then on both sides, we're going to multiply negative 23. So I'm going to distribute that negative 23 to all those terms. Okay, so the first one doesn't change because I don't need to change that one. Okay, so now that next equation will now be negative 23M minus 23E and equals negative 138. Okay, so now what I need to do is cancel out the M. So that cancels out. Now I'm going to add up the rest. So remember, we always add up the rest of the equation, whatever we got left. So now we've got 27E minus 23E. That's going to give us 4. And then over here, it's going to give us 16 for 154 minus 138. Then we'll divide both sides by 4. And then E equals 4. All right, so now we simply just take that 4 and plug it into the easier equation, the M plus E. We'll do that right over here because that's the amount of English books. Now we're going to find the amount of math books. I plug in the 4, subtract 4 from both sides, and then we get M equals 2. Okay, so now I'm going to write out the answers, and that we get 4 English books and 2 math books. Okay, and remember, you can always pause the video as I go if I'm going a little too fast for you. Okay, let's clear the screen up. Okay, so the next one. Is about a farmhouse that shelters 16 animals. So that's a key piece of info. Okay, so that's going to be shelters a total of 16 animals. Some of them are chickens. Okay, some of them are cows, and altogether these animals have 60 legs. So there's another total. So there's our two equations. One's going to be about the total animals, and one's going to be about the total amount of legs that these animals have. So how many chickens, all right, so there's our first variable, and how many cows, there's our second variable, are in the farmhouse. Okay, well, first of all, let's define the chickens and cows. Well, for chickens, we'll call it C, but notice how cows are also C. So for cows, I'll just go ahead and use W, just because that's the next letter that I think stands out. Okay, so we're going to do C for chickens, W for cows. Okay, now for the first equation, the 16. Okay, since we have 16 total animals, that means that the chickens plus the cows should equal 16. C plus W equals 16. Now, the second one, you have to think a little bit. Now, it says, remember, that the total amount of legs, and we're talking about the legs of these animals, I know it's kind of weird, is 60. For chickens, remember, a chicken has 2 legs, and a cow has 4 legs, right? So, if a chicken has 2 legs, well, then that would be 2 times the amount of chickens. And then for cows, that'd be 4 times the amount of chickens. And then that would equal 60. So that's why I get 2C here, because 2 legs for chickens, and 4 because 4W because 4 legs for cows. Okay, so just like the last problem, we're going to set this up. You can kind of already see what we're going to do here. We need to, since this is the equation with smaller variables, we're going to multiply just this one. And again, I'm going to do elimination again because, again, we don't have a variable by itself. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just multiply the second equation times -2. That will cancel out the c. Okay, so this first equation doesn't change. Now, remember, I have to multiply every term in the second equation. So now the 2 c's will cancel out. And now I add up the rest. Okay, so now 4W minus 2W is 2W. And then 60 minus 32 is 28. And then divide both sides by 2. And then W equals 14. So we got 14 cows. Now we got to figure out the amount of chickens. Again, take that number, plug it into the easier equation. We get C plus 14. Take away 14 both sides. And the amount of chickens is 2. Okay, so we get 14 cows and 2 chickens total. Okay. All right, next question. All right, so now this one, Rodney's Kitchen Supplies makes and sells spoons and forks. Okay. The cost, it costs the store $2 to buy supplies needed to make a fork. So it's $2 to make a fork and $1 for supplies needed to make a spoon. Okay. So $2 to make a fork, $1 to make a spoon. The store sells the forks for $4. So they sell them for the forks for $4 and the spoons for $5. Okay, so they to make the first one is talking about like how much it costs to make the spoons and forks. I mean the forks and spoons. The second one talks about how much they sell them for. Okay, so that sounds like 2 separate equations. All right. Last month, Rodney's Kitchen Supplies spent $39. Okay, so that's definitely a total. $39 on supplies. Okay, so there's our first equation. The first equation is going to be about supplies. Okay, and sold all the forks and spoons that were made last month using those supplies for $93. Okay, so there are 2 equations. Are going to end up. One's going to be about how much they spent on supplies for the forks and spoons, and then how much they actually sold everything for. Okay, and again, here's forks and spoons as our variable, so that'll be how we start. Let's define our variables, forks and spoons, just like the last one we did, forks and spoons, F and S. Now the first one says $2 for $2 of supplies needed to make a fork. Okay, so we could say 2 times F there, and then $1 of supplies to make a spoon. That's 1 times S. Okay, and then we're talking about supplies, right? Well, there was a total of $39, so it's the 2F plus the 1S equals the 39. That's the supplies. Okay, now for the next one, it's $4 times the amount of forks, so 4F plus $5 per spoon, so that's 5S equals the total amount that everything sold for, which was 93. Okay, so there's our second equation. Okay, so now that again, this one looks like elimination. So we're going to have to change one of these equations so that they match up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's change the first equation because again, what I want to try to do is eliminate the F variable. And if I multiply this first one by -2, that'll make it -4, which will be opposites. And then that way we can eliminate. Okay, so then if I distribute that -2 to the first one, I get -4F minus 2S equals -78. I didn't change the second one, so I just bring that down. Now these first one, F is going to eliminate here. Okay, and then we add up the rest. So 2 at -2S plus 5S, that's going to be 3S. And this right side will be 15. Okay, divide both sides by 3. Then we get S equals 5. So the amount of spoons that were made and sold were 5. Okay, then I have to plug in that 5 into one of the equations. Okay, so you notice how I took that 5, I plugged it into the first equation, and I got a couple extra steps here. It's not as easy as the last couple problems. Okay, so the next thing is I multiply that 1 times 5, I get 5. Now I got to subtract the 5 on both sides. Okay, that cancels out the 5 there. Okay, I get 2f equals 34 after I subtract 5. Now divide 2 on both sides, and I get forks is equal to 17. So the amount of spoons I had was 5, and the amount of forks I had was 17. Okay. All right, last one here. Okay, so Marcos had 15 coins in nickels and quarters. Okay, so 15 total, so that's definitely a total, nickels and quarters. He had 3 more quarters than nickels, so 3 more quarters than nickels, and he wrote his system's equations to represent the situation. Okay, so before I move forward, that's all the information we have is those first two sentences to make our equations. Okay, the second sentence says, let X represent the number of nickels and let Y represent the number of quarters. So it's telling us what variables to use this time. We're not just coming up with those on our own. Then he solved the system by graphing. What is the solution? Basically, what is X and what is Y? Okay, so here's the deal. We're not going to do graphing. Okay, we're going to go ahead and continue kind of the methods that we've been using. So as we go through this, okay? So the first one's pretty simple. The total 15 coins, well, first of oh yeah, hold on. First, X is nickels and Y is quarters. So let's write that down. So we have our variable defined. Okay, so now let's create an equation. Okay, so now the first one, it says 15 coins total and nickels and quarters. So that means if I add nickels plus quarters, or X plus Y, that should equal 15. So there's the first equation. Okay, now the next one, it says he had 3 more quarters than nickels. Okay, so let's just say it started with the amount of quarters, right? And I want to figure out how many quarters I have. Well, in order to figure that out, well, first of all, there's more quarters, right? There's more quarters than nickels. So if I want to know the amount of quarters, that means I have nickels, I have to add 3 to the amount of nickels in order to equal the amount of quarters, because there's more quarters than there are nickels. So my equation ends up being y equals x plus 3. Now this is going to be very similar to the very first problem that we did here in the notes, because we have one of our equations is equal to y by itself. So what that means is I can actually substitute and take this x plus 3 and plug it right here into y. Okay, so that's just what we'll do. Okay, so I plug that into y, and so it's x plus 3. Okay, so now what I'm going to do here is I got like terms here, so I got x plus x. It's going to give me 2x. And then next I'm going to subtract that 3 from both sides. Okay, then we get 2x equals 12. Then we divide by 2, and x equals 6. And then I want to plug that into the easiest equation I have there, which would be the second one here. So I'm going to plug in the 6, and 6 plus 3 is 9. So that means the total amount of nickels is 6, and the total amount of quarters is 9. All right, that's it for your notes.